Chris, are you here to give us a little?
I can tee it up and then call me and So the way that I'll sort of start this is the current agreement, or the current agreement that is in place. We are looking to have an amendment to that agreement. So Kevin from Genesee Land Trust is here to actually kind of go over what that amendment will allow for moving forward, specifically, what's going to be done and how it's going to be treated. So I'm going to hand it to Kevin to let him sort of, again, kind of dot the i's and cross the t's in regards to how the agreement is going to be amended.
Great. Okay, thanks, Chris. My name is Kevin Farrell. I'm with Genesee Land Trust. We've worked with the town of Webster for a number of years, most notably at the Gosnell Big Woods Nature Preserve. When that land was donated to the town of Webster, there was also a conservation easement donated to Genesee Land Trust that we hold over the town of Webster that just governs what is allowed and what is not allowed on that property. So we have about 25 of these throughout the region, and we ensure that the landowner, the town, is following these terms every year, do monitoring visits and everything like that. This easement was from 2005, 2006, and at that time, language that was put in that easement prohibited some use of certain management practices for invasive plants and insects. So currently, the Gosnell Big Woods and a number of other properties throughout the region are being hit with a notorious invasive insect called hemlock woolly adelgid, a little insect that kills hemlock trees. So the Gosnell Big Woods Conservation Easement is, there's a lot of hemlock in there, so the property would look very different if no action was taken. So in 2019, Supervisor Nesbitt requested to amend the conservation easement to allow for treatment of hemlock woolly adelgid. The Genesee Land Trust Board approved that and drafted language for an amendment. And again, that was in 2019. And the language sets a plan that in the future, when the town has any invasive insects on the property or other invasive plants, they can submit a plan to Genesee Land Trust, and based on best available science and best management practices, we would permit the town to deal with that invasion or that detriment to the conservation easement. So all of our current conservation easements that we put out already include this language, so it's sort of looking at some of our older easements to make sure we're able to address these threats going forward. So that's sort of an overview, and it's something, again, we've been working on it for a few years. Mark Yeager and myself sort of put together a plan of how we're going to do it for this specific insect. But again, this amendment is just changing the easement to allow for the town to suggest plans to deal with whatever invasives there are in the future. Because when this easement was written, we didn't know about this specific invasive threat. You know, they've spread quite a bit. You hear about emerald ash borer, invasive shrubs and everything. So it's just sort of updating some new language to this easement.
So because there are so many new and interesting invasive species, does Genesee Land Trust do any sort of advisement as to when they know about these things?
Yeah, we do. And, conservation easements are different than lands we own because we can only recommend things that the landowner do. But our relationship with the town of Webster has been that we work very closely with them and suggest things and actions that can be taken to help with invasives. And Friends of Webster Trails has been very active at this specific property and so many others in sort of keeping these invasives out. So I work very closely with John Betcher and Norma Platt from Friends of Webster Trails and the town, and I've talked with Chris and Glenn about this, a few weeks and months ago, as sort of what our strategy is for this. So we do look for that best available science, and that's why this amendment would only allow the town to submit plans, and then we would check in with, Cornell, with Finger Lakes Land Trust, with the county, with others who already have that science about what the best way to deal with the threat is.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic summary about it. That was great. Charlie,
Yes, I have a comment.
please do.
I was just going to say that if this is passed tonight, which is fine, because this is a transfer of an interest in land by the town, and even though we've already done it, it is a modification of a prior transfer. It's subject to permissive referendum under the town law, so we could not file this regardless of when it's signed for at least 30 days. We'd have to wait the 30-day period in the event there is a request for a permissive referendum.
What are we actually transferring?
We're giving them rights to the land to go in and effectively deal with the problem, so.
It would sort of be similar to that, but it's sort of allowing the town to do the treatment, but we would be working very closely in this scenario to put that plan together. So it's, but amending it, it is sort of changing this land interest that is the conservation easement.
I have a question. Who first recognizes the problem?
In this scenario, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Town of Webster volunteers, Norma Platt and John Betcher, who monitored the property, identified the invasive threat and brought it to the land trust's attention. And we sort of started looking for science and seeing what others were doing. And then at that point, we reviewed the conservation easement to see, what's permissible and what was not. And in this instance, since it was a 2005, 2006 easement, there was language that wouldn't allow us to do that. When today, we have that language standard in most of our habitat conservation easements that allow best management practices for dealing with ecological threats.
Actually, Charlie, thank you for the insights on the permissive referendum. My question to you was going to be, do you think we should read word for word this amendment to the conservation easement before we vote on it?
I could do that.
Well, you're talking about particularly paragraph number 30.
Well,
I don't know that you need to. I mean, I think it's been pretty well explained. To be honest with you, basically, everything has been said. If you want to read it, sure.
well, Deputy Supervisor Cataldi, I'll leave it to her how much of it you would like to read.
An amendment to the conservation easement. This amendment to the conservation easement is entered into on this 5th day of November, 2020, by and between Genesee Land Trust, having an address of 500 East Avenue, Suite 200, Rochester 14607, grantee, and the town of Webster, having an address of 1000 Ridge Road, 14580. Whereas grantor is in successor in interest to Thomas Gosnell and Georgia Gosnell, and grantee have previously entered into that certain conservation easement dated February 13th, 2006. Whereas the grantor and grantee desire to amend the terms and provisions of such easement, therefore, for $1 and other good and valuable consideration, the receipt and adequacy of this hereby acknowledged, the parties hereto agree as follows. All initially capitalized terms used in this amendment, but not defined herein, shall have the meaning ascribed thereto in the easement. Grantor and grantee agree that section 30 of the easement is hereby deleted and replaced with the following. Non-native and invasive species, grantor may selectively cut and otherwise mechanically remove non-native invasive species for biological management with prior written consent of grantee, which approval shall not be unreasonably withheld. With prior consent of grantee at the sole discretion of grantee, grantor may use pesticides and herbicides for the treatment of non-native invasive species. Follow a written plan that is approved by the grantee and in accordance with the generally accepted best management practices and available scientific knowledge at the time. Does not diminish the character of the natural habitat, is limited in scope, frequency, and intensity, documents and addresses the long-term impact of the proposed action, with prior written notice to the grantor, steps 1 through 5. Grantee may selectively cut and otherwise mechanically remove non-native invasive species and use pesticides or herbicides for the treatment of non-native and invasive species. Non-native species may be intentionally introduced on the property in the sole discretion with prior written approval. Except as modified.
Sorry, thought you were done.
Hereby, all terms and conditions of the easement shall remain unmodified and in full force and effect. The enforcement is governed and construed in accordance with the laws of the state of New York. This amendment may be executed simultaneously or in one or more counterparts, each of which shall be deemed an original and all of which together constitute one and the same instrument.
That is really, I mean, again, bullet number, item number 30 is really the one in the original agreement that's actually being modified.
Right.
So
Right.
all of that, that's really the meat of it is that bullet number 30.
Yes,
Is that your motion?
that is my motion.
I second.
We amend the easement.
Sorry, one thing I'll just say is, when you start reading there, just the address of Genesee Land Trust was incorrect in what you had there, so I don't know if that was just a slightly older version.
What is
But,
the correct address?
It's 46 Prince Street, Suite LL 005.
Dolly, did you get that?
46 Prince Street, I'm sorry, what was it?
46 Prince Street, Suite LL 005.
Thank you.
Is it still 14607?
Yes.
So I assume this was provided to us.
It was, yeah.
Is somebody going to provide us one of the new address?
Yeah, I'll make sure you get the one with the
Okay.
correct address.
You can send it right to the supervisor.
Okay.
Patty made a motion and I seconded it.
Councilwoman Cataldi,
Aye.
Councilman Dean,
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty,
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.